We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to the Booked on Rock podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and give us a 5-star review. That'll help get the podcast out to more listeners. Our website, bookedonrock.com, is a listing of all the major platforms where you can listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. Legendary photographer Elliott Landy is our guest to talk about his book, Photographs of Janis Joplin, On the Road and on Stage. Landy presents an intimate look at the legendary female singer-songwriter. His iconic images of Janis, both on the road and in concert, capture and preserve her pure essence, as well as her onstage magnificence. Photographs of Janis Joplin features beautifully reproduced large-format images, many never before published. Janis's own words, taken from recorded interviews by David Dalton, are used as extended captions and paired with photographs to provide insight into the woman behind the legend. Best known for his classic rock photographs, Elliott Landy was one of the first music photographers to be recognized as an artist. He was an official photographer of the 1969 Woodstock Festival. Along with Janis Joplin, his photographic works include famous portraits of Bob Dylan, the band, Morrison, and Jimi Hendrix. Published worldwide in books and magazines for 50 years, he's exhibited in many museums and art institutions and published 10 books of his photographs. He joins us from his home in Woodstock, New York. Check out all of Janis's classic 1972 live album In Concert over on the show notes page. Now, onto our interview with Elliott Landy. Elliott, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Hi, it is really nice to be talking about this book, which I love very much. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's our pleasure, and thank you for putting out such a beautiful book. The photographs are amazing. But before we get to the book, there's a fascinating statement you make. It's from 1994, and it's in the introduction of the book. You said, quote, "Above all, I was into photography for the image. Meaning and content were secondary. I saw that the way to do that was to present a work of art so well composed that its form touched something within the viewer which would help them feel the essence of what was happening when the photo was taken." Can you expand on that a bit? I mean, is there a certain approach or a technique that you use?
It fascinates me also because I couldn't have said it again like that. So really, thank you for reminding me. Is there a certain approach? Gosh, yes, there's no approach. Basically, when I take a picture, usually when I start photographing someone, wherever we are, where we start is where we do it. I rarely set things up. I did when I photographed the album for Music from Big Pink. But my style, my nature is to do it in the moment, to do it as it is, to do it au naturel, to do it without any artifice, without any setup at all. And I'm just kind of glued. The word that comes to me is my eye is glued to the viewfinder, and that's all I'm about. That's all I'm seeing at that moment is what's in the viewfinder. And I'm not even thinking about what's in the viewfinder. I'm just trying to make it look balanced.
You're looking for a certain emotion, right? Because there are some photos in this book, and I want to ask you about, of Janis, just personal up-close shots. Is there a certain expression?
I don't think of it as looking for an emotion or a feeling. I just look, and when I feel it's nice, I take a picture. So it's really for some reason the image of a bakery comes into my head when you ask that question, and I guess it's like putting the dough together and then putting it in the oven and watching it rise, and at some point you know when to take it out of the oven. I think that's what happens for me when I take a picture.
You have to take a lot of shots, right? You go through a lot of photos before you pick out certain ones.
That's true. Yes, that's true. But it's not always like that. But usually when you're photographing someone, like for instance, when you're photographing someone for a job or a purpose, for an album cover, something like that, and you have to get a result, so you take a lot of shots like that. Also, when someone is on stage, I take a lot of photographs because I can't control how they're going to move, and it's hard to control the proper shutters, the proper camera settings. In these years, it's not so hard. Well, it's still hard to control the proper camera settings because the lights are changing and so on. But I don't know. I just let it flow is all I can say.
How did you get into photography? What sparked your interest in it?
There's two periods. The first period was when I was 13 years old, and I was in with my parents. We went to a bungalow colony, and they had, for 13-year-olds, you became a counselor in training. Weren't old enough to be a counselor, and you weren't young enough to be a camper. So I was a counselor in training, and they gave us different things to do every week, different sections. So one week I may have assisted in boating, and another week it could have been tennis, and another week it could have been growing food or something, whatever they were doing, you know. And then somewhere in there, somewhere the second or third week of fourth week, who knows, of the summer, I was given the job to go to assist in the darkroom. And the moment I got in the darkroom, I totally fell in love with it. It's the only place I wanted to be. And I loved shaking the liquids around in the brown bottles and putting the thermometer and taking the right temperature of the chemistry and putting the prints into the developer to see what the pictures were and developing the film. Everything about the darkroom, being there in that room, it had, I guess it was red lights at that time. Maybe it was orange. It could have been red or orange. I'm not sure what my first one was, but I was just in love with it. And there was no reason I was in love with it, because I had never taken a picture practically. You're right. I had no interest in photography or even looking at pictures particularly, but there was some trigger. I'm sure it's from a past life that was like, okay, you're home now. I spent that summer in the darkroom. I mean, I was outside also, but that's where I stayed. I became the go-to person for kids to ask questions or whatever like that. And that was the next fall. I was going into high school. The high school I went to was the Bronx High School of Science, and I went there, and I was really hot on photography, on continuing, even though I still wasn't taking pictures. I didn't have a camera. My parents had a Brownie, and I actually took just recently. I mean, in the last 5 to 10 years, I saw some pictures that I had taken that summer with my parents' Brownie camera. And they're quite good, actually. At the time, I had no idea, but they're quite good, because instead of just taking a head-on picture, I got down on my knee. I'm photographing my sister, who's sitting on a seesaw, and you see the angle going one way and the lines going the other way. So there are a few pictures like that. And I said, boy, even then I had an eye for it. So anyway, so when I got into the first few days of high school, they said you had to choose your club. So I chose the photography club, and I went to the first meeting, and the teacher is handing out papers, and he says, write down the names of the cameras, plural, or no, of the camera and lenses, plural lenses that you have. And I said, I don't belong here. I don't even have a camera, no less lenses, and I'm just not qualified to be in this club. And I kind of slipped out the back door, and I didn't pick up a camera again until I graduated from college.
Wow.
So yeah. So that's rather sad, I guess. I mean, it is rather sad. I'm saying, I guess there's a lesson in it for teachers, perhaps, to not assume. Anyway, I won't say what the lesson is, but certainly, and I remember the teacher who it was also, because I had him for physics a few years later, and I was just so shy about myself, so insecure is, I guess, the right word, that I just didn't have any courage of what I knew or what I believed in or whatever it was in those years. So after I got out of college, I got a camera. Let's see, I borrowed my sister's Polaroid camera, my older sister's Polaroid camera, and I was going out to Fire Island, and I was working there to make some money and staying over and just spending weekends like that. I couldn't have afforded just to go out and rent a room there. So I had to work in a restaurant, and then they gave us room and board with that. So I also had some really nice times. But so I borrowed my sister's Polaroid one time, and I took a picture. I had a shaky tripod that goes with it, and I took a picture of a full moon at night, like that, and with a shine on the land on a path down the road. I kind of remember the picture a little bit, and I brought the picture. It was a Polaroid, and I brought the picture into the Fire Island News, right? And they published it. So that was really the first picture I ever had published like that. And it was pretty much one of the first pictures I ever took. You know, maybe I took 2 or 3 Polaroids or something. And I don't have a copy of it. They never gave me the picture back. I never thought, I thought about it, but it was gone. It disappeared, you know. So I can't show it to anybody, but I remember. So that was my first picture.
Wow. But I wonder if that issue is somewhere in the archives online.
Oh, I hope you'll find it and share
Yeah.
it with me.
Yeah. What about your first camera?
Yeah.
Do you still have your first camera? Do you own it still?
The first camera was a Nickermat that I bought. And because I found out that a friend of mine, just not a friend of mine, it's a girl I went to high school with, and this was after college here, was just looked me up and invited me to come over to her place. And she showed me this brand new Nikon camera that she had. And this was right after high school, after college rather. And I had no idea what a Nikon camera was even. And she said, "Oh, this is the best camera," and that. And so and then a few months later, I had this experience with taking pictures with the Polaroid, and I really liked it from there. So I thought I'll buy a camera. So I went to the camera store, and the Nikon was expensive, so I bought a Nickermat camera, which is a junior version of a Nikon, which are a pretty good camera. And I remember being on the Fire Island ferry and trying to take pictures of the water at night again, and I couldn't. I forget what it was, but I wanted to look down at the camera at my like a waist level, looking down at the camera rather than having it up to my eye for some reason. And the Nickermat wouldn't let me do that, but the Nikon would. So I went back to the camera store a week later and I traded it in. I think I borrowed some money from my mother to get the upgrade in the camera. And so my first camera was really a Nikon, which is, the camera that I used for many years until I switched to digital. Actually, I switched to Olympus after Nikon. That's right. But that was it. And no, I don't have that.
Don't have it anymore.
At all. No. But my cameras are a whole other story. I don't know if we have time, but I'm very into the technology of it. And in order to take the concert photographs that we're talking about in the Janis book, in those years, the lenses were what we call slow, meaning they need a lot of light to get a picture. And it's called an f4, f-stop 4. The light levels at concerts were very, very low in those years. And it was a struggle to hold the camera still, and they're moving, so it's blurry. And the film was also very slow. Today it's easy. Today you can take pictures in darkness and get a sharp photograph because the digital technology is so far out. But in those years, so basically I bought an East German lens. It was a Zeiss East German lens that was an f2.8 lens, which is a much wider aperture, a much wider lens, and you need half the light that with the f4 lens. So, and it was a cast iron lens also, which in those years I didn't mind carrying around at all. And the good thing about a cast iron is it's very heavy, and inertia then keeps it still. So when I'm standing trying to hold the camera against my eye, and the camera stays still, it doesn't shake. It was very light. It could shake around with my breathing even. It was so heavy, it becomes steady. So I had this special, unique lens actually that I don't know if anyone else had a lens like that. It was an East German lens that I specially got, and I had it modified to work on the Nikon.
Wow.
So I don't know how we got into that.
No, but it's fascinating to me because you're talking about cameras like a guitarist talks about all the guitars he has. And
oh, yeah. Oh, of course. Oh, my God. Absolutely.
It's the same type of thing. You just have such a passion for it, and you're looking for.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about your very first concert. You talk about this in the book, February 2nd of 1968. Can you take us back to that night?
I was working with underground newspapers to publish anti-war photographs to help try and stop the Vietnam War. And I became, none of the mainstream papers wanted to take the pictures that I was shooting of these peace demonstrations. There could be a fairly large peace demonstration in New York City, and the New York Times would give it, maybe a third of a column, 2/3 of a column in the middle of the paper, or even if it was on the front page, there were never any pictures of it at all. There was just words about it, and you had no idea what was going on. So I decided I want to go to these concerts and these demonstrations and take photographs there. So I became the photo editor of one of these underground newspapers. It was called The Rat Subterranean News, meaning underground news. And one night after we put the newspaper to bed, It was all laid out and everything. I was walking along Second Avenue, and I see a marquee on a theater that says Country Joe and the Fish Light Show. I had no idea what that was. I didn't know what Country Joe and the Fish was. I certainly didn't know what a light show was, or vice versa. Maybe I could imagine what a light show was, but I had no idea what Country Joe and the Fish were. So I went over to the box office to see what was happening. And when I went to the box office, I heard the music coming out of the theater, which is really good music. And I showed her my press pass, and she let me go inside. I stood in the back at first when I went in, and I was greeted by this incredible wall of light, moving light forms is all I could describe it as, colored oils and waters and being mixed. A light show where 4 or 5 people playing visual music to the audio music that they were listening to. So the people who were running the light show were jamming with the music by bouncing this colored oil and colored water, which, because they don't mix, form beautiful shapes, looking like paramecium and all that stuff. So they're keeping rhythm with the colored oils and waters to the rhythm of the music. And then there's someone who's got a film projector, and he or she is projecting images anywhere on the screen they want to, anywhere on the back wall. And someone else has got a slide projector. And then there was maybe someone else who just colored gels. It was all really quite, this was the Joshua Light Show. So it's really an incredible experience. I say it because, I would like to urge people to try and go back to light shows, because it's different when you see a pre-organized or pre-recorded visual when you're looking at a concert where the lights go on here and off there, and everything is adjusted and done to perfection. But a lot of the beauty of life, and certainly in photography, it's like this, and I know in improvisational music and jazz music, it's like that also, that unexpected things happen, and not everything is perfect all the time. But the fact that not everything is perfect all the time somehow enhances it when it is perfect. It's like a sine curve, which everything is a sine curve. It starts, goes up to the top, and goes down. Life is like that. And most things we do in life is like that, I guess. Eating food is like that. You start the meal without eating, you go up to yum, 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 and then down, and so on. So when you don't have something pre-organized, when you have something like the light shows were, it's a very special feeling. It's like having another aspect to the music, different than having preordained light show is what comes to me to say. With special video and so on, everything matches too perfectly, in my opinion. Sometimes, most of the time. Sometimes, not most. So anyway, I was just really knocked out by it, blown away. I was really, wow, this is wonderful. And I wanted to go down, I wanted to get close to the musicians and look at what they're doing better than from the back of the stage. So I took out my camera and I went up front, and I went up to the front. I figured that gave me the right to go up to the front of the stage. So I did that, and I got down low so as not to block people's vision. I try and be careful when I'm photographing. And I was really not, and I sold a couple of the pictures. I went up to 2 magazines, I think, asking them, and those are really my first published rock pictures.
2 weeks later, same venue, but this time
Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company.
This is your second concert. Yeah, February 17th of 1968, Big Brother.
Wow.
Yeah. Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. This was their first ever New York show, right?
Yes, it was, right. And again, I had no idea who they were or what they were. I knew what Big Brother and the Holding Company was. I thought that was a very clever name for a band. But I didn't know that, it was, I didn't know anything about it. And then after that concert, also with Country Joe, everything in the 60s was very easygoing in terms of at these concerts in the beginning, because there were no real stars. The musicians were like we were. The musicians were just people who were playing music up on stage. They weren't stars with a career, and they weren't in the atmosphere of life yet. They weren't
larger than life yet.
Larger than life, yes, that's right.
So security security wasn't as bulked up as it is nowadays.
Security was a couple of guys at the door at the backstage entrance, or in this case, it was steps going upstairs, and that's it. And they saw that I had cameras on, I didn't even know if I had to show my press pass or anything like that. They saw I had cameras on. I had like a few cameras I was working with. I wasn't just an amateur photographer, so to speak. And they just let me go on upstairs. So I was in the dressing room with Country Joe. That was the first time. And Linda Eastman was there, who later married Paul McCartney. And she was there taking pictures also and so on.
Now, the photographs you took that night of Janis, you write that you had never seen photographs like the ones that came out of your camera at that concert. What was it about those photos that had such an effect on you? Oh, I did my research here, Elliott. I did my research.
Really, it's great. I'm so happy I wrote that stuff.
You almost forget you're writing.
I did. No, I totally, as I say, I'm a very spontaneous person. And so I wrote that. I was remembering that. Oh, you know what it is also? Once I write something, once it's a part of history of me, and once I remember it and write it down, I could easily forget these things. Some things I don't, but I mean, that's an absolutely true statement. I had never seen pictures like those, and the light shows, the gorgeous colors that were in the light shows, and the way Janis was moving, and sometimes I would move with her. I would dance with the music, so to speak. So that gave me a blur, and I set my camera for a slow shutter speed, which means that when she's moving, you don't see a quick, like a frozen hand or a frozen head bobbing around. You see a really nice blur, which is gives you the feeling of the music. Whereas a sharp photographs gives you you can get the feeling from it too.
What goes into deciding whether you want it to be a black and white or a color? Or is that just the camera you're using?
Well, in those years, magazines couldn't translate a color photograph to black and white. You can never do it black and white to color. Well, you can fill in colors now. But in those years, and magazines, newspapers, some of them wanted black and white, some wanted color. So to really cover it, you had to use one camera for black and white film, other camera with color film, and I had 4 cameras. I had because you can of course, but it's not good to have to change lenses, to unscrew the lens while you're in the middle of a concert, and so let's just say you have two cameras, one black and white, one color, but then you have to have a wide angle lens to get the whole stage and wide angle shot of a whole person, and then you want a telephoto lens to get up close to their face. So you can't really switch lenses in the middle of shooting, because you miss a lot of stuff that way. So basically, I had 2 cameras with color film, one wide angle, one telephoto lens on each of those, and 2 cameras with black and white film.
Okay,
to cover that.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. The Booked on Rock podcast is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bookedonrockpodcast, on Twitter at bookedonrock, and on Instagram at bookedonrockpodcast. You write in the book that Janis, her spirit glowed. Was that glow the same off stage? Did you know her? Did you get to know her pretty well off stage?
Well, I was, let's see, that's a good question.
She was shy, it seemed like, off stage.
You know what? I was talking, when I say that, I really wasn't talking about her personality. I wasn't talking about sitting with her and being beguiled by stories or her character, anything like that. So when I mean her spirit glow, I mean when she was performing, because that was her high point in life. That was her moment. That's what she lived for, I'd say. She wanted a boyfriend, and she wanted many things in her life. She wanted a mate, but she really lived for her art, and that came first. She put everything in front of that. If you read what I love about my Janis book is that I was able to use David Dalton's audio tapes of Janis, and we picked out a paragraph or 2 or a sentence for many of the photographs that really explained Janis, that really expanded a reader's vision of Janis.
Well, is this the same David Dalton, the New York Times best-selling author? David Dalton, right?
Yes.
Founding editor of Rolling Stone. How did he get involved with this project? How were you able to team up with him for this?
I met David because he used some of I forget the first time I met him, but he used some of my photographs in one of his books. And then years back, I wanted to do a film about Janis based on David's book. My life partner at the time was a film producer, and I said, why don't there's this great book about Janis, Piece of My Heart, that David wrote, where he interviews her, and it's worth reading. There's so many long conversations that he had with her and things she said. You really get the sense of who she was as a human being. And we were talking about glowing. So my point about when I said she glows, it was her music and her being when she was in this in the height of her creative vision, of her creative expression. I was talking about, and Janis as a person was also lovely, but I wouldn't describe it as glowing. She was just a really gentle, actually considerate person. Always laughing, always wanting to see the humor in things. I can't always, there's no always, but she was often depressed as well. But when I saw her, I didn't see much of that. I didn't know her that well. We went to Detroit together. Big Brother was playing a gig there, and I went with them to photograph them to Detroit. And I spent time with her then on the plane and in the hotel and so on. I never hung out at bars or had long talks. Then she came over to my house one time with Myra Friedman, our publicist, to look at my photographs because they were looking for a picture for the album Cosmic Blues, and they didn't find anything that they wanted to use, which I thought, looking back, I see that there are a lot of pictures they should have and could have used for that album cover, but they didn't. And then when I was photographing her, in between the Anderson Theater and the Fillmore East, and after that, we spent some time together, just a little bit, and nothing intimate. I'm not talking about physically intimate. I mean, we never got into deep conversations, stuff like that.
She did,
but I was really struck by her humility, and her caring about how she affected people.
Yeah, you use the three words you use: loving, considerate, and lonely. Profound observation on your part. There's a story that you tell of her getting out of a cab just after a big show in New York. And can you tell this story? She's just basically saying, I'm a big star and I'm all alone.
I have no one to be with. Yeah, here I am, because we were going, the guys had invited me, they had all invited me to go to this party with them. And Janis was in the cab, and we drove to where she was staying and was dropping her off. And they said, oh man, I said, come on, why don't you come with us? And she said, oh, I'm just not in the mood. She says, here I am, a star. I don't remember the exact words. Here I am. She must have said a big star, and I've got no one to be with.
Yeah, I got it right here. Man, what a drag. Here I am, a big star, and I can't find anyone to be with. Yeah. You feel bad? It's kind of sad.
We all felt bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget which members of the band were in there. In those years, you're going to have more than 3 people in the back of a New York taxi cab. There were 2 jumper seats in front and then 3 in the back, so you can have at least 5 people there. And they said, come with us, but she said, no, man, whatever, and she left. So that was a touching moment.
When you're younger, you think it's just the dream come true. You're famous, you're rich and famous. Everybody loves you. You're a rock star. And then as you get older, you read more and more about these performers who are, most of them are lonely. Some of them are fortunate enough to find, Paul McCartney had Linda Eastman, but not all of them have that.
It's got to do with inner growth, with just the fact that you've reached the pinnacle, the apex of your creative expression, and a lot of people besides you love it. Doesn't mean that you're psychologically prepared for what that attention brings. It's very hard to have everybody looking at you and writing about you and wanting things from you. When you're famous, wherever you go, people want something from you. It could be just your friends, you just talk to them, or some want your friendship, or some want professional help, or someone wants you to listen to what they're doing, some want autographs and so on. Or even just your attention, just the thrilled by the famous person talking to them, or knowing they want to let the person that's famous know what they do, and which is fair enough. I mean, it's not bad, but it's hard to be the recipient of that kind of energy, because it's kind of like people taking over your space that way.
When you met Janis at Woodstock. You met up with her because you had already known her by then. She had the breakthrough single Piece of My Heart by then. A major star, yet still the same Janis. No prima donna trip. And you say she was as gracious to you as she'd ever been. And then she goes on stage and blows you away. You say her concerts were the best ever. Do you have a personal favorite concert from Janis?
Oh, I don't actually. I just remember how I felt at the concerts. I wouldn't remember the first one to compare it with the one at Woodstock. I loved the one at Woodstock. I was right on stage with her. That was, I guess, well, when I was at the Fillmore and the Anderson Theater and any other concert I'd been to with them, it was Newport, except for Newport, I was able, well, even Newport, I guess, I was able to get very close. I was at the bottom of the stage, and she was right there. But at Woodstock, I was on stage actually and off to the side a bit.
Man.
But really, really close. It's different. You be on stage because you're hearing what they're hearing, from the speakers. But I don't. They were just all fabulous. And of all the concerts I've been to, it's the Big Brother ones. Big Brother with Janis, especially with Big Brother, and the Woodstock one. She wasn't with Big Brother. That was fabulous too. Now they say she was terrible. They say meaning her management and maybe she too thought it was a terrible performance at Woodstock. But they were judging, I think, from the recording of it. And what I heard, and being on stage there, I was just really, and I wasn't stoned or anything. It was just really amazing experience.
What a massive event. I don't think anybody expected it to become as massive as it did.
No, it was a total surprise. I mean, we could get into talking about Woodstock if you want, but it was a complete surprise. And it was only everyone there, I can't say everyone, but close to everyone there was smoking, had smoked grass or was close to smoking grass in their life. And grass makes you very mellow and also opens up your spiritual aspect. Also opens up your audio senses and the way you see. It enhances good parts of human beings, whereas alcohol enhances bad parts. You don't see anybody. Robin Williams jokes about this. He says you don't see potheads having fights in bars. You don't see potheads having fights with each other. Whereas when people get inebriated, when people drink alcohol, that's what they do. It's an aggressive substance, and marijuana is a peaceful substance. The reason that it was able to exist was that Governor Rockefeller decided not to, I believe it was Rockefeller, I'm pretty sure it was, told the police to stay out because the police knew people were using drugs, quote unquote, had this ominous word that's supposed to be terrible for people. And they were thinking it's our job to stop that from happening. But if they had gone in, it would have been a riot because there was 500,000 people there. And how many police are going to go in and what are they going to do? So it would have been a real tragedy. And Rockefeller said, stay out, let them do what they want to do. And it really showed the world what marijuana, and not everyone was stoned necessarily all the time, but there was a lot of that there. But a lot of people were working and had to do stuff. But it really showed, as Max Yasgur said to the audience, Max was the guy that owned the farm that they rented to do the festival on. And at one point he got up and addressed the crowd and he says, you young people have shown the world what this generation is like, or you people have shown the world what this generation is like, because the older people, the older generation, the media, the standard media, the establishment media looked down totally on the hippie movement. There was they did an interest story on it, but there was no real analysis or looking at it at all. Hippies were weird. They were different from normal people, and therefore, they weren't good. And there was no love for it. There was no understanding of it. But with Woodstock, what happened is that the essence of the hippie mentality, and I say hippie, I mean people that were, I guess it's the only way to describe it. It was a hippie generation. Not everybody who belonged to it was a hippie necessarily, having long hair and wearing leather and all that stuff. You can have a hippie mentality and just think like that and hang out and be free. But I say that Woodstock was a utopian moment in time. It was an example of how when when everyone in your universe, in your world, is thinking lovingly and peacefully, wants peace and love, and is considerate of other people, then we can have peace. We can have a culture, a civilization of peace. But you have to have the things that the hippie generation had. You have to know that it's important to respect everyone, to respect not only where they're standing and not push them away, but also how they feel sexually. They want to have heterosexual relations. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And women can want that as well as men. It didn't have to be a man taking advantage of women, which was the general view of sexuality up till that point. And if you want to have sex with someone who had the same physique as you did, that was okay also. Why not? So all that started, and if you wanted to space out and not pay attention to information, that's okay too, because it's feeling that you want to pay attention to. So the 60s was really about that, about learning to accept life as it is, not as you would like it to be because of some societal cultural mores that come from who knows where, from 2,000 years ago. It starts out, let's say.
And Janice embraced that whole attitude. That was
yes,
that
she
was her.
completely embraced that, and she was really an example of her feminine spirit shone through, and she was strong, and she was firm about what she wanted as an artist, and she wanted to control it, control what she did and how her music was, and at the same time she had a deep feminine quality, which is being receptive, being open to people. She met someone, she was interested in what they were about also, not just wanting to say, I do this, I do that, and so on. So that's what the feminine energy is. And what little I knew of her, she was nurturing to people. She was, always a friend. I didn't know her towards the end, when she was on heroin and all that stuff. I said all that stuff. I don't know what she was doing drug wise, but that stuff changes your personality. It really hurts you. I think of it as borrowing from the future. You feel good for a little while, and then the future takes it back from you in spades. So I just wanted to say, like, things like the statements, do your own thing, which was popular within the alternative culture, is a very deep philosophical statement. It's just saying, find out what you really love to do and do that, and with the assumption, with the expectation that if everyone does what they would like, what they really want to do, then everything will fit together and everything will work out. Rather than thinking you have to get a job and make money and be a lawyer or be a doctor, whatever your parents may want you to be, or just be a carpenter, or whatever it was, but not to just that you don't have to work only to earn money. Yes, you have to work for money, but the idea was to try and express yourself if there was a part of you that wanted to express something. Not everyone had to express yourself. So you could just hang out and be and do nothing. So there was that kind of freedom of thought, which is so important, because look what's happening today with social media and YouTube and Facebook, and how kids feel shame because they're not special. They're not what do you call it? An influencer.
By the way, you don't live far from the original site of Woodstock, right?
We do, actually. It's about an hour and a half by car.
Ah, okay. So
to get there.
But you're in Woodstock, New York right now?
Yes, yeah. I moved here in 1968 after I had photographed the band and Bob Dylan, and I becoming successful as a photographer, earning some money at it. I was looking for a larger apartment in New York City where I was living, and I realized that I had more friends in Woodstock. And it was not only the guys in the band and Dylan, but anyone we met in the street. I'm walking around hanging out with the band people, members. So anyone I met there was, I knew them also. And so I realized that I could get a house in Woodstock and keep my small apartment in the city to come in and take care of whatever city business I had, but that I felt much more at home in Woodstock than I did in New York City. And I still do. It's always, we have a little place in the city now, and I go there actually. I say we go there on weekends, and not every weekend, but probably every other weekend, usually sometimes every third weekend. But I say, I joke and I say I go there to escape the stress of Woodstock. Um, but it's actually true because, in a way, because I've been creating and doing things since 1967 or so, when I became an active photographer. And I have done a lot of things. This music photography that everybody knows is 2 years. It was less than 2 years of my time. And I continued to take photographs all that time during all that time. And I was always writing things down. There's a lot of really good, what you might call poems, but I never did it to write a poem. I just wrote in that form, I guess. It made more sense to me. I also got very involved in metaphysical things. And I did about 60 hours of question and answer with the clairvoyant woman about things like what is life about and why are we here, and the kind of stuff everybody would like to know the answer to. And we talked about relationships and men and women and how you grow, and it's just a really beautiful thing. So I have that book to do, and then I also do now a spiritual energy practice, I guess, is that I do, called sharing still. I call it sharing stillness, because when I do this energy work, a feeling of very deep stillness comes over people. Comes in, not everyone, but most of the people that are there feel it, and it's like an instant meditation for people. So I do that, and there's a number of books already waiting on me to do. So when I go to the city, I just kind of leave that all here and in my studio, and I also have some music that I've done, and gosh knows what else.
Speaking of music, I was going to ask you, when you started taking these photos of Janis and you're at Woodstock, were you a fan of the rock and roll that was out at that time? Were you a fan of
Hendrix?
Hendrix?
Know about it.
No?
I didn't know about it. My first experience with it was the Country Joe concert. My second was Janis Joplin.
So what music were you listening to at that time?
I mean, I don't remember, actually. I don't remember. I must have been. I'm sure I was listening to music. Let's see. Hold on. Frank Zappa. Now it's coming back to me.
Nice.
I listened to Dave Van Ronk, his folk singer, and Bob Dylan, certainly. But I've never been to a rock and roll concert like that. It was more of a, let's see, who was I listening to? Gosh. I guess if you showed me names of the people who had records and were on radio in those years.
Yeah. Were you a Beatles fan?
I could pick them out. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I
did. I liked them. I mean, I wasn't wild about them. I was wild about them in later years, after in 67, 68, after they got, when they started Revolver and so on, and the White Album. But I did certainly like I Want to Hold Your Hand. I really enjoyed that, but I wasn't nuts about it. I wouldn't, walk around telling people, but it was nice when it came on. You danced to it and you enjoyed it. So yeah, that was good.
I want to get this.
And I was always a fan of Richie Havens.
Oh, Richie Havens, yeah. And he was the first guy out there, just because he was the only one. He only had a guitar in hand, so they were able to get him onto the helicopter and fly over all those people and get him on stage so he can play.
Actually, I think he had a couple. I think he had one musician.
Yeah, that's right. He did have one or two other guys, but yeah.
So yeah, he did. Yeah.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. Like the Booked on Rock podcast? Tell a friend and give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I want to ask you about some of the photos in the book here. There's one where Janis is sitting on her suitcase at the airport in New York City. She's on the way to a gig in Detroit. And this is cool because the hustle and bustle of people behind her, and then there's Janis looking up at something, or she's thinking intently about something. What do you recall about these shots?
She was no different than any other one of us. And I was just in the airport with them as if I'd go with my own family, or I'd go with you if we were going someplace together. Except I had a camera and I was photographing it, but I never interfered with what was going on when I photographed anything. I never stood in front of somebody and shoved my camera in their face, so to speak, or asked people to move or to turn around. I was very careful not to bother people. And the expression is fly on the wall. And thinking back to the the first two sessions at the Anderson Theater with Janiss and first Country Joe and then Janiss, that the reason they let me stay in the room and take pictures was I didn't bother anybody. I was just there. I stood in the corner. I just let them be who they were and do what they wanted to do, because I wanted to show what was happening. I didn't want to show what I made happen. I wanted to show what was happening, which was a very beautiful thing. I mean, I was really enamored with the music and the culture and the freedom of these people. That's why I went backstage to take pictures. It had nothing to do with anybody being famous or work or getting things I could sell. I never even thought about selling these pictures when I was taking them. It was just like, it's what I wanted to do. And when I stopped wanting to do it, when I stopped wanting to do this kind of stuff, I just stopped. And people have said to me, well, you had really made it in that area, and why didn't you go on and, with it? And I just didn't feel like it, because I had already done it. I mean, I know why, knowing myself now, but it became repetitive for me. Like, you take a picture of someone at a microphone and you do that, no matter who's at the microphone, it's the same picture, even though the experience is totally different. But at that point, when photography was brand new to me, it's like when you have an infant child, anything that child does, you're there, because you're there to protect it, but also to groove on it, to enjoy it as well. And so with photography, for me, the kinetic spiritual connection I was experiencing from being a photographer, not being a photographer, from taking pictures was so powerful for me that when I no longer was getting anything new from it or loving it, for whatever reason I wasn't loving it, I didn't want to do it anymore. I just didn't feel like taking photographs of bands anymore. The money situations came into it, negotiating with management, which I didn't like. It was I really should have had an agent for that, but I didn't. But basically, I had done it. I had photographed someone at a microphone, and I had been backstage and been quiet and just crept around while they were doing what they were doing. And I wasn't getting the thrill of doing something new with a camera. So for a while I stopped, and then my wife got pregnant and we had a child. And that's all I wanted to do, was to be with them, and therefore to photograph them, to share the beauty of mother and child. That's what it was about for me. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced personally, was to see a mother with a child, nurturing, breastfeeding, and just the caring. And of course, I was doing that also with the child as well. It wasn't one-sided. So I was basically just photographing my life there.
I'll steal a quote from Sting. Sting has a song, "Let your soul be your pilot."
Exactly. I had no idea that that's what was happening at the time, but that was what was happening for sure.
So many great quotes from Janiss in this book, and I'll just give a few of them here. But she talks about, this is a quote that she told David Dalton on playing music. She said, "It's not just for you. You can't just sing how you feel. You've got to take how you feel, sift it through whatever vocal cords you have, whatever instrumentation you have, whatever arrangements you have, and try and create a swelling feeling in an audience." That's so good. There's so many great quotes. Is there one that stands out in this book?
I open the book and I see one that's really important. And this is the reason a lot of music is not so great anymore. She says, "Any musician that I see that's working, especially those 6 days a week cats, they're only doing it because they love music. There's no other reason. No money is worth that." Musicians weren't that well paid that in her line of work and the people she met. And that's so true, that when the 60s musicians, the rock and roll musicians in the 60s, they didn't start playing because it was a way to fame and fortune. They played because they were forced to, because they loved it so much. That's all they could do. And the idea of becoming a superstar didn't exist. Rock and roll musicians were not superstars, like folk musicians weren't superstars. And so I love that quote. That's really important. And that's what she was about also. Yeah. It was only the music that drove her.
She seemed so down to earth. She probably had no idea how iconic she would become after she died.
I don't know about that. We never talked about it. I had no clue, actually. I had no clue. All I know is that she was great when I saw her, and I never thought that she would die young or would not. But Yeah, I had no clue that any of these photographs that I took would become so important. And when I didn't want to do this anymore, I almost abandoned. I could have abandoned all these negatives and slides because I had finished with it. And I mean finished. I just wanted. We left. I didn't want to live in the United States anymore because I didn't like the culture. It was the United States is very uncultured compared to Europe, let's say, especially at that time. Now it's grown quite a bit. The idea of the treatment of women here and the treatment of nudity. Like a breast is something that feeds a child. It's the most important thing, that we can have, right? The third most important thing we can have. So why are we shaming anyone who shows their breast? And why is a breast only used as a means of attracting someone to you sexually? And why are men, when they see breasts, attracted sexually? Everything got turned upside down here. I don't mean that Europe was all better than that, but I've been to Europe, but I was just looking for a better culture to live in, where we could raise a child with different kind of values that was happening in mainstream America, with the Vietnam War going on, electing a guy like Nixon as president, and so on. So I just left everything. I left, and luckily my slides and negatives were saved by a photo agency, Magnum, and also this lab that I was using. He had all my negatives because he was printing for me, not all my negatives, but a whole bunch. And like 7 years later, when I got back to New York, I went to see him, and he just hands me a box. And he says, I bet you want these, like that, I'm going like this and holding it up.
And that includes the ones in this book?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Magnum had some of them. It wasn't just this guy, but he had a lot, and Magnum had a lot too. But I just walked away from it. I didn't want to take it with me to Europe. I didn't know what I was going to do in Europe. So all this and it was meant to be. A lot of people have lost their work, or a lot of their work. I think probably the thing I say about forgetting is you don't remember what you forgot. So I'm sure there's work here. There's work that I did that didn't survive, but the majority of it, I can't think of anything major that isn't here. Once in a while, I'll remember something I photographed, and it's not around anymore like that, but very rarely.
Well, thankfully, they saved the stunning shot of Janis that you used for the cover, which is also in the book. It's like a silhouette of Janis surrounded by a display of colors. This one from her show at the Anderson Theater in New York, February 17th, 1968. What led you to choosing this for the cover?
Well, I had a designer who worked for me on my book of photographs of the band. And I asked her to put together a few possible covers. This is one of the things she put together for Janis Joplin. In other words, she had worked with me for the band. And when I started thinking about doing a Janis Joplin book, she put together this one and a few other covers. And this is just the right one. It's the most stunning picture because it's not the physicality of Janis. It's really the spirit of Janis. It's the, that's all I could say about it. It really is her. It's not tied to the particular problem she had, how she looked, how people heard her. There's none of that. There's only spirit, I'll call it, only the form, not the specifics of her life, which were painful to her in many ways. And obviously the end was painful too. So she passed away like that. So that's why it just felt right. It felt right to do that.
It is a perfect shot.
Thank you. Really, I appreciate that you've looked at this so much. I'm going to read you the first picture in the book of her at Woodstock, and to me, that's absolutely one of my favorite photographs I've ever taken. And it's just a woman opening herself up, giving everything she's got to give, and knowing it's going to be accepted and loved by everyone. And this is what we as a culture need women to do, not to be held back, not to be paid less, not to think they don't have as much chance at succeeding in a company than men do, because it's really feminine energy that the world needs right now. War and greed and all this thing is masculine energy. I don't mean a man having genitals versus a woman having a woman's genitals. I mean it's a vibration. It's a form of being. It's a way of feeling, of looking at life, of dealing with life.
Well, that leads me to a quote that she has, and I'm curious as to what you make of this quote. She said, "Women, to be in the music business, give up more than you'd ever know." What do you make of that quote? What did she mean by that?
Meaning that they can't let they have to assume a lot of male energy in order to push their energy, push their way through the blocks, the bricks, because it was much harder for a woman to succeed than a man in almost anything, especially at that time. So that's what she means by it. So she has to give up being soft and receptive and trusting everybody and just so she had to give, she couldn't be as feminine as she would have liked to have been. Also, though, like men don't like strong women, and she has to be the boss, but she's always touring as well. Men in those years, now also, who knows, wanted the woman to be home and take care of the house and the children and cook and so on and so forth. And she wasn't that kind of a person. So, that's what she meant by she had to give up the relationship side. You're traveling so much. I remember she saying things about that she couldn't have a relationship because she was always traveling and her career had to come first, not the man. And men, I think, like to come first in a woman's life. And women too. I'm not saying men bad, women good. I'm really not, because it's a human nature to want to be first. Want to be the first object of attention. You want to be first in your mother's eyes if you have brothers and sisters. So I'm not putting down the male thing, but that's what she's talking about. I think that's what she's talking about.
Here's another one I thought was interesting. She said, "I used to sing exactly like Bessie Smith, and when I started singing with Big Brother, that was the only thing I knew how to do, and I used to wonder, especially when people would clap and tell me I was good, I used to wonder, is that real or is that something I've learned to do with my voice? Like I was tricking people or getting away with something. Maybe Bessie felt that way. I used to ask guys I was bawling. Do I bawl like I sing? Is it really me? That's what I'm trying to say. Is it really me or am I putting on a show?"
Yeah, that was her insecurity. She was very, very insecure. She was abused in high school. She was I don't want to go into the whole thing of it, but she was really disliked. And even when she came back for a reunion, maybe, I don't know how many years after she graduated, but she was a superstar by then. But they still mocked her and they still made fun of her, the same kids in school. They still didn't pay her the honor that she deserved to have, but as a great star, but even as a human being, especially as a human being. And they made fun of the way she looked and so on. If you read, a lot of this is in David's book, which is the only way I know it. She never told it to me. But she was always made fun of, and not always. You can't use, it's not a platitude, but words like that, always, often, enough time so it really hurt her. Whatever I want to say about that.
I remember she talked about going back for her high school reunion where she grew up in Texas.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the high school reunion, yeah.
Some of the photos you take just speak volumes, like the one that's a real close-up shot of Janice. This is at a press party, and she's with her manager, Albert Grossman, and she's got this childlike look. She's cuddled up tightly to his back, and she's holding this beer in her hand, and she's holding onto it tightly. The look in her eyes, it's like a frightened child thrown into a scary world to fend for herself. And
that's beautiful, because that's what she's saying in that quote that you said about, you have no idea what I would give up to do this. She felt safe and protected. So she was the woman, and the male is the protector, the physically stronger person. And that's the nature of life. The male is the one that goes out and gets the food, and she was protected by this. It could have been a woman also. It happened to be a man, by this person. So she could let down the wall of defense, let's say, that people build up. Everyone has it to some degree, for sure. And she had suffered a lot of, use the word again, emotional abuse. And also as a performer, I'm sure she got lots of catcalls where she's singing and people are talking about her body. That happened. So with Albert, he was her protector.
You had to have felt like this is a moment here because you got right up close to her. Right up
because
close.
I knew them already. I had photographed them and Albert in his office and backstage, so I was already comfortable enough to do. And it was also a press party. It was there so people could take pictures and write stories about it. So I wasn't invading a private moment in their office, which I don't know if I would have gotten that kind of picture. But everyone was there. That was the reason to be there, was to take pictures and stuff. So I guess that's how I got so close to them.
How about the one where she's sitting next to Andy Warhol? This is at Max's Kansas City, New York City.
Yeah.
Paul Morrison and musician Tim Buckley are there as well. What's the backstory on this one?
Well, that was after opening night at the Fillmore East. The Fillmore East opened sometime in March, and Janis Joplin was the first. Big Brother was the first headlining act of the Fillmore East. There were three other acts. There was Tim Buckley and I think Albert King, also. But the main attraction was Big Brother and Albert. So after the concert, we all went up. I had been photographing them. I was around them. I was part of it. I was doing the story on them. So we all got in cabs and we went up to Max's Kansas City, and Andy Warhol hung out there. I mean, that was his hangout. So they all sat together, right? And I had no clue that he was going to be so famous at all, right? And no clue about the significance of the two of them sitting together like that. To me, I was just covering it. By covering, I don't mean as a paid reporter, but I was just trying to share what was going on in their lives, in Big Brother's lives. And one of the things going on was going to Max's Kansas City, which was the in club in New York at that time. And going to Max's Kansas City for dinner. And Andy Warhol was one of the artists that was hanging out. He was famous, he was well known, but he wasn't as revered as he is now. And his stuff wasn't worth millions of dollars. I don't think it was. Maybe he was getting a lot. I don't know, actually. But it wasn't, it certainly wasn't what it is today. So that's what happened. It just happened. And interestingly, in those years, we were shooting film. You had to use, as I said, you needed to shoot color film and black and white film. And sometimes, maybe then I didn't have 4 cameras. Maybe I only had 2 cameras or three, I don't know. But sometimes I wanted to shoot color film while I hadn't finished a whole roll of black and white film. So I would rewind the film and take it out of the camera with while there was still film left to shoot, because it was expensive and so on. Didn't want to waste it. So this was, and I would just put it in my bag in a film canister. And I had done that with a roll of black and white film that night. And so in other words, it was exposed. Let's say there were 6 or 7 frames of the black and white film exposed already on the film. So I re-rolled it and then I put in a different kind of film or whatever it was. And then when I needed some film that night, I just reached into my bag and I grabbed the same canister and I put it back in the camera. So the pictures of Janis and Andy at that table and Tim Buckley at that table, I shot over other pictures I had taken previously. So it was like a double exposure. And I don't know why I did that, but the other pictures, you can see that Peter Alban was in I've been photographing Peter Alban in the other pictures. So he looks like a ghost image. And if you see the actual photograph from the negative, you'll see that he looks like a ghost image. But we retouched it out, so it looks like the picture should have looked when it was taken like that. But what a group of pictures to ruin, right? With double exposures. I love double exposures, but in this case, it didn't really add anything artistic to it at all. I was like in a blur is the word that comes to me, meaning I wasn't focused on, I'm going to show what this is like to everybody, and I'm going to catch every single thing. I'm just going to be there and take pictures when I see the pictures to be taken. And it wasn't an urgent thing to me. It was something I was doing, and I did it casually, which is, I guess, why I got access, because I wasn't uptight about it. And if I missed a picture, I didn't go, oh, shit, could you do that again? It was nothing like that. It was just very casual.
The best photos will be the ones where they forget that you're even there.
Well, that's most of them. Yeah. I asked Peter Albin recently, I said, you remember me taking pictures? Can you tell me anything? Can you say anything about how I was when I was taking pictures? He said, to be honest with you, he said, I don't remember at all.
Which is a compliment.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Did they ever use any of your shots for album covers? Because I'm thinking about Janis's greatest hits. Is that yours on the cover?
It was in the second album. It was really their first national album that Columbia Records did. The inside cover, the light show picture, the band with the light show behind them. So the inside double fold.
Okay,
spread
which album
was my photograph? Cheap Thrills.
Cheap Thrills. Okay,
the first CBS album. On the cover was I think it was was it Stanley Mouse? No, I forget. Wow, I forget. One of the great cartoonists, one of the great West Coast cartoonists. I don't think it was Stanley Mouse. No.
Well, I'm going to cheat. It's Robert Crumb. I'm cheating.
Crumb.
I'm cheating. I'm not going to say that Robert. I knew that one yet. Right. So she passed in October of 1970. When was the last time you photographed, saw, or spoke to Janis?
Was at Woodstock. It was really the performance. Actually, it's interesting because I was going to say I'd like to read this to you. And so here it is. This was, the last time was at night at Woodstock. I didn't see her the next day. I didn't see them backstage after that. So this was the last time I photographed her. And I told a friend of mine, who knows my photography, that was going to be, I wanted people to look at the book and open it up just to a picture of her. I didn't want to open it up to a copyright page or to the title, Elliott Landy, Janis Joplin. I wanted them to just get her right away. And this picture, to me, really expresses who she was, what she was, why she was, and what she did for everyone. Okay, so I told him I was going to just put that picture on the front. And I don't know if I said I was looking for some words to put with it or not. I'm not sure. Anyway, I forget how it came up, but he said, I must have said that I'm trying to find the right words to go with that photograph. And he said, well, don't you know this one? And he reads it to me. It's a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay. And it says, I could say Janis is saying, because it sounds like her. It says, my candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But my foes, and my friends, it gives a lovely light. And that's what Janis's life was about. She went all out. She didn't hold back. She gave up relationships with men. That's what she meant by you don't know what it takes. She gave up trying to find someone as a life mate and so on. And it burns at both ends, but what a lovely light. And it's just, this is so perfect for that. And just for this opening page alone, I'm proud of this book. Because I really feel that it says, Janis is saying, this is me. And that's really all I wanted to do with the book was to share that.
Powerful.
Did you read the dedication on it? It says, to the spirit, soul, and beauty of Janis Joplin, with gratitude and pleasure for all she gave us. That's good. I like that.
Yes, absolutely.
I didn't have to say for Janis, much better than for Janis. To the spirit, soul, and beauty of Janis Joplin, with gratitude and pleasure for all she gave us.
She would love
That's great. Yeah. This picture looks like a candle just shining on her. It's like it's shining bright.
You're right.
And that's what, that's really wow. Interesting and beautiful opening.
I love that she's barefoot in that shot too.
Yeah, she is barefoot there. My wife is really, she says, you don't notice anything like it. Because I don't think about things. I really approach things holistically, I guess. And I just go in there when I pay attention to how I'm feeling about something. When I'm taking a picture, of course, I'm looking through that viewpoint and moving and waiting for everything to look right and so on. But I depend on feeling that it's right. And that's how I do when I go someplace, I'll turn this way or that way. It's a very intuitive thing that I do with it. Because thinking is another game. Thinking is another ball game. And being is different than that. And being is a very feminine way of experiencing life. And thinking, not thinking, but I don't want to get into it. I don't have the right words for it. But that's not talk about feminine energy versus masculine energy. And what needs to be is that both sexes need to have both ways of being because they're both valuable. We need to think and figure everything out and plan stuff, and I mean, women certainly do that also, but we need to have goals and go out and explore space and whatever that, what we consider the male thing. And we also need to feel everything and be loving towards each other and nurturing towards each other.
Amen to that.
So what's important to me about doing, because I did a book of my band photographs and now Janice, and I have others planned. What's important to me is to share the spirit of the 60s, of the late 60s, the spirit of peace and love, because that's what the goal was. People knew we couldn't go on in the world the way it was, and unless we the people of the world found inner peace and love, and found out how to spread that in community and to create communities based on being nice to each other, based on love, then we wouldn't survive as a planet. And now we see the results of not achieving those goals, how we are on the edge, the precipice. Environmentalism is a main opportunity we had that came from the 60s. I don't mean it was invented in the 60s, but it was the first time that it got any public notice, any press, any sharing in major media began there. And what is environmentalism? It's loving. You can't say loving the planet. I mean, you can, of course, you can love the planet. If you're really smart about it, you'll love the planet, but you can grasp it. But we don't. We love where we live. We love the sunshine. We love the grass. We love the people. We love going out and so on. So loving the experience of life on the planet, I think, is more appropriate way to talk about it. And loving the fact that it's warm and it's cold, or if you live in a southern place, it's warm all the time, whatever. But just appreciating that, and then realizing cognitively that you have to maintain that we are doing things that's going to destroy this and make it disappear. So that's what the 60s is about. And for me, I know when people, I don't know what the book does for you and so on, but when people are called back to this time, it also elevates that hole in everyone, that space in everyone, where we are most comfortable with being peaceful and loving in our behavior. That's the nicest we can feel, I think, is when we're nice to someone, when we're acting quietly, when somebody, let's say, may say something nasty to us, and we just bounces off us because we feel so good being peaceful and loving.
It's a great philosophy. I guess when I look through this book, I think of a time that I wish I was around for. I was born in 1972, and I wish that books like this help you to capture a little bit of that spirit for those who weren't there.
The reason that you want it is because you have it in you, and you're aware that it's there, and you know it's good. So it's not that you're unfamiliar with it. And the way to become peaceful and loving is through changing your inner vibration. And there are a number of ways of changing your inner vibration. And one of them is through meditation. One of them is through the desire to be peaceful and loving. You can see a shrink, and you could be aware of your behavior. And when you do something that's not nice to somebody, you're aware of it and say, oh, I didn't want to do that really. Mostly one learns in relationships, in marital relationships, or people you're living with. You come in from childhood, and you're not so conscious of what you do. So you may be rude to someone, and then your partner says, hey, I didn't like that, or he or she gets sad or cries or gets angry and so on. So you learn that's not really good behavior. And so when that's not behavior, because it doesn't result in what you want in your life. It doesn't result in a pat on the back, let's say, or caress of your cheek. So when you learn these things, then you also see that that's how to feel good, is to be like that. So therefore you don't go over the edge. You don't go to the other side. Somebody is nasty to you, you're not nasty back. You just walk away from it. It's Martin Luther King style. That's what it's about. Gandhi style. Just stay in your space of love, let's say. I'll share one more thing, and then I have to go actually.
Sure.
But and I think it's important that when I no longer wanted to do photographs of peace demonstrations, see, that happened, and also the rock and roll music and so on, which I was consciously doing because I thought I was helping people by showing them how beautiful this stuff was, and also trying to stop the Vietnam War. But I was feeling guilty. I said, well, I have a responsibility to do this stuff, to speak out and to tell people how bad the war is, and to show people, to bring people to this culture. But then I read in a so I was conflicted about stopping it, but I stopped it because I wanted to stop it. As that quote from Sting is right on. You know, I thought with my soul, I guess. I don't know exactly what he said, but it's like that. But I read in a spiritual book that if you spend your time fighting against evil, then evil has won. Then you've lost because it's taken your time. It's stolen your time. All your time is devoted to evil things, whether you're for them or against them. It's still devoted to it. And that gave me the freedom to pursue what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, you know, which was just simply to take pictures when I felt like taking pictures because I was in the midst of something that was a loving situation. I thought something was beautiful, and I wanted to share it with people, which is why I was doing the rock and roll photographs. I thought it was beautiful. I also thought it was beautiful that people were taking peace demonstration, but were demonstrating against the war. That was a beautiful thing to do, but just a different kind of beauty, I guess.
Yeah, and you capture photos of that time in this book, specifically of Janis, and that was her attitude. That was the way she felt. Photographs of Janis Joplin on the road and on stage, and it's out now through Backbeat Books. It's available wherever books are sold. You have a website? Do you want to get?
Yes, I do. It's ElliottLandy.com. That's 2 L's and 2 T's. ElliotTLandy.com. And I sell autographed copies there. It's more expensive than in the bookstore. And as I tell people, the least important words in the book are my signature. But if you want it, I do that. Then I also do this. I do the spiritual energy work, which is extraordinarily powerful, I'd say. Helpful, extraordinarily helpful. People feel it as very powerful. It's sharingstillness.com. You can read about it there. And it really helps people change who they are and change their lives and express themselves better. And there's talking there, but there's no lectures. It's just an experience. It's like sharing energy. It is sharing energy is what I do there.
Well, I'll share the links to your websites on the show notes page to make it easier for everyone, too.
So it's 2 websites. It's sharingstillness.com and also ElliottLandy.com. And you might like the Sharing Stillness. You should come. I think that it would resonate for you. And it's free. There's no charge. You can leave a donation if you want. The Edgar Cayce Foundation is sponsoring is presenting it, not sponsoring it, presenting it. So there's no charge for the Sharing Stillness.
Very cool. SharingStillness.com.
Thank you. Beautiful interview.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you, Elliott. This was fantastic.
Bye.
Thanks as always for listening. I'm Eric Senich. BookedOnRock.com is our website. Subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star review if you can. And thanks to all those who've given us great reviews. It is appreciated. Talk to you again next time for another brand new episode of Booked on Rock.
That's it. It's in the books.